top story today. Over the weekend, the media frenzy continued, with popular pundits and esteemed editorial boards continuing to call on Donald Trump to step out of the presidential race. No, that is my fantasy Monday morning story. In reality, these ridiculous commentators are not getting it. The public is tired of their misplaced focus on whether Joe Biden mispronounced a word or spoke slowly for an 81-year-old man. What we want the press to be doing is what they claim that they do, which is speak truth to power. And I want to share with you some conversation, or rather tweet exchange I had with a television news host, S.E. Cupp. She is on CNN. She said, "It's not the media's job to be his press shop," meaning Joe Biden, "or combat other media that's being unfavorable. It's to hold people in power accountable, period." So my response to S.E. Cupp of CNN News was as follows. I completely agree. The part I was agreeing with is, the press should never just be stenographers for political candidates. But, I added, to be fair, you work for CNN. You are power. The independent press has to hold all of you accountable. So what I mean by that is this. How in the world did CNN agree to have a debate when they would not fact check the information put out by the candidates? Donald Trump lied in nearly every sentence that he uttered and misled the public. And yet the comments from the moderators were thank you. And then they moved on. And yet, after the debate, long after people had gone to bed, their expert fact checker, Dan Dale, went through item by item by item all of the misleading statements that Donald Trump made. They are doing a disservice to the public when you have, 20 or 40 million people tuned in for something, and they judge a debate based on how virile and how authoritative someone sounds as they are lying through their teeth. That is doing a disservice to the public, and I feel like people like me and people like you should push back. My second story relates to the first. It's the good news part of this feeding frenzy, which is the public is pushing back. And we, the voters in the polls, are actually supporting Joe Biden in higher numbers than before the debate, and in swing states especially. We have the Morning Consult poll that came out over the weekend saying that Joe Biden was up in Michigan and Wisconsin and Donald Trump was down. Now, polls don't tell us everything. However, the press seems to be relying on these polls and builds their arguments based on them. So let me talk about something beyond the polls, which is positive news. And that is the incredibly energetic team that Joe Biden is part of. First, VP Kamala Harris was amazing over the weekend at this Essence Festival, where she spoke on stage for quite a while and discussed the policy record of the Biden-Harris team and addressed the problem when the press continues to ignore all of the danger that Donald Trump presents.
Sadly, the press has not been covering it as much as they should in proportion to the seriousness of what just happened when the United States Supreme Court essentially told this individual who has been convicted of 34 felonies that he will be immune from essentially the activity he has told us he is prepared to engage in if he gets back into the White House. Understand what we all know. in 122 days. We each have the power to decide what kind of country we want to live in. Understand what we know. When there has been a full-on intentional attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. When I talk about the family that raised me, yes, they took me in a stroller as they were marching and shouting for justice, knowing that justice will not be achieved unless we are prepared to march and shout and fight for it. And one of the ways we do that is through our vote.
But in addition to VP Harris, we saw various other surrogates on the campaign trail speaking up on behalf of Joe Biden, and more than that, demonstrating that they will be able to, a team spread out across the country to all the states, including the swing states, and represent what it means if you decide to select the Democratic ticket.
No one is naive. If we haven't been paying attention, my gosh, we've been asleep the last few years. For most of my life, we've seen this revolution of rights and expansion of rights across the board. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen rights regressions. The Trump administration, Project 2025, you'll see if we're paying attention. Even Trump is trying to deny he had any association with that. That says everything you need to know. But this election fundamentally is about rolling back. If Donald Trump succeeds, God help us, we will roll back the last half century. It's America in reverse. They want to bring us back to a pre-1960s world, and you are the front lines of that opposition.
Okay, and now for my third item before Crazy Town. Democracy is having a moment. Over the weekend, we saw voters fight against fascism in the UK and in France. Let's start with the UK. On July 4th, there were elections for members of parliament. Now, the general election wasn't supposed to take place until December of this year, but the then current prime minister in May called upon the king to dissolve parliament and scheduled the election for July 4th. The result was miraculous. The Conservative Party that had been in power for decades lost control. And now Labour has the majority of seats in the House of Commons. And now the leader of the party, Keir Starmer, has already moved into 10 Downing Street, and he is selecting his cabinet. And I believe in about a week from now, they will hold their first session of Parliament. Now, I want you to look at this chart so you compare the last election in 2019 when the Conservatives won and Boris Johnson came into power. You can see the red number declines and the blue number increases, demonstrating here how many seats Labour gained and how much the Conservatives lost. This is huge because you may remember that Boris Johnson was carrying on David Cameron, the former Prime Minister's project involving ushering in Brexit, that very xenophobic, very isolated, very right-wing project to separate England from the EU, and also very much ideologically aligned with Donald Trump. And vive la France! I cannot overemphasize how important it was that a coalition of leftists formed the New Popular Front in order to gain more seats in the parliament than Marine Le Pen's party called the National Rally. If the National Rally Party had secured a majority in parliament, they would have put into office for the first time since World War II a far-right party. This would have been a disaster. Where we stand this Monday morning, though, is there is no party with a majority, and this is called a hung parliament. Pretty common over the years in the UK, not as usual in France. Welcome to Crazy Town. Crazy Town is this idea that is not getting traction, but that people are trying to push out in the media that would erase all of our votes that we made across the country during the Democratic primary. And instead of continuing to, as per the rules, allow the people who were elected, namely Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, serve as the Democratic candidates in the November election, to instead hold a mini primary before the September convention. Now let me repeat that to you. This is not gaining traction. This is a wackadoodle idea for a number of reasons. And instead of just ignoring it, the press is now acting as if it is a significant deal. Now you may say to me, then why am I talking about it? Well, because it's Crazy Town, and that's what I do. Now, it is being positioned on Twitter as a plan circulating among Democratic donors for a blitz primary. Now, what does it mean to say a plan is circulating among Democratic donors? In this case, it means a law professor, someone like me, had an idea, wrote it up in a memo, and sent it, maybe by email, to at least 2 donors. And maybe they circulate it to themselves. So what? Why is that newsworthy? What's funny, though, are the responses to this. I love what Greg Ollier said. Guys, relax. A venture capitalist has figured out how to pick a new nominee via tournament. It's like a game show, except instead of winning money, they light the campaign's $91 million on fire. That's all I got for you today. Remember tonight to watch America's Show with Ali Samarco and Adam Parkamenko. I'll be back tomorrow morning, as always, with Morning Jen. And of course, we will have the Nerds at noon on Tuesday and all of our programming for the rest of the week. Remember to subscribe for free on Mary Trump Media. See you soon.